Welcome to Open Studio, where we put a spotlight on the arts, artists, and issues in the cultural community. I'm Tom Musgrave. Our guest today is Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist and Lexington native Jahi Chikwendiu. In May, he was awarded the Pulitzer in feature photography for a photo essay he did for the Washington Post. Jahi has been shooting photos for the Post since 2001. He's covered stories that include Washington, D.C.'s broken school system, the 2003 U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, AIDS and poverty in Kenya, genocide in Darfur, cluster bomb victims in South Lebanon, and the 2011 formation of the world's newest country, South Sudan. Jahi's work has been recognized by such organizations as the White House News Photographers Association, National Press Photographers Association, Pictures of the Year International, World Press Photo, National Association of Black Journalists, Overseas Press Club, Harry Chapman Media Awards, Days Japan International Photojournalism Awards, and Kentucky News Photographers Association. Also the Atlanta Photojournalism Seminars, Northern Short Course, and Southern Short Course. Wow, I got to take a breath there. So welcome, Jahi.
Oh, wow. All right, cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Yeah, you just rambled off a whole bunch of stuff that, I don't give much thought to, but I guess all the stuff you just said is true.
Well, and I'm sure there's stories behind all of them. But right now, I want to drill down into get right to it. How did you feel when you learned that you'd been awarded the Pulitzer?
Dang, I've had time to think about that now, right? A month to think about it, but how I felt was just, I don't know, for real, I'm going to tell it in the same way I told it to the people of my newsroom that it was kind of like, I kind of understood how Steph Curry, the Warriors guard, point guard, kind of how he feels when he hits that long range 3-point shot at the end of the game, and when he's hit it and he's calmly shimmying back down the court. I understand kind of that feeling, the calm shimmy, if you will, because the shimmy because of the accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
Just won the game on this last second half court shot. But the calm being because if you look closely at the shot, the form is still the same. It's the same form, Steph Curry form that it always is. It just happened at this crazy and chaotic time, but the form was still the same. So the calm along with the shimmy then comes from, hey, I'm just doing what I feel like I've been doing for a long time. Uh, um, so that was my initial feeling. I can't even lie. I raised my head to the skies and with tears and eyes, thanks to my mother and my father for all the things they've given me. But I also remembered this dude, Sam, I think his name was, a security guard at the Washington Post back when I first started in the early 2000s. Every time I would see him, he would say, "Man, hey, you got that Pulitzer yet?" And I would say, "Nah, not yet, brother, not yet. Hey, but I'm just out here grinding." And he said this over the course of years, and after a few years, I could be walking down the halls of the Washington Post, and I could hear that, "Hey, you got that Pulitzer yet?" Without even seeing him, I would know it was him, and I would say, "Nah, bro, not yet." But he started saying, you know what? I'm not worried about it. You're gonna get it, but you're gonna get it when you least expect it." And that is exactly what happened because I got it on my very last assignment for the Washington Post before I retired.
So I got to ask, is Sam still with us?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel kind of guilty because I've been wanting to look out for him. And even in leading up to this conversation with you, remembering his story again, I know I need to put some effort into looking into where he is now because I don't know.
Well, it's still a good story. It's and definitely foreshadowing, don't you think?
Oh man, it's if you don't believe in, I'm not a big religious person, right? But I'm a mathematician along with being a photographer. So I understand some bigger mathematical workings of these things in life all around us. And I just felt like, for a long time in my life, certain math has been written, but not just written, but also in little ways revealed to me along the way, if that makes sense. Like, hey, all this little mathematical stuff, these things that seem to be adding up based on the hard work you're putting into, nah, the stuff is true. And I felt like he's one of those,
Yeah,
the Morgan Freeman character in a movie playing God
yeah,
saying,
yeah. That's interesting. But and so I love that you have that detail to sort of your superhero origin story at the Post.
hmm, hmm,
I don't they Hollywood couldn't write that. I don't think.
right,
Um,
right.
so I want to talk about the work that earned you the Pulitzer. I was purposely vague when describing the work because it's very heavy, and I don't think
Hmm,
I could do it justice. I've seen the work, and that is why I don't think I can describe it.
hmm.
I'm going to ask you if you would please describe it for us, your photo essay.
Well, first of all, the photo essay is titled Tanner's Song. uh, He's Dying, She's Pregnant is the title. And it basically sums it up as Tana's song. I get emotional even thinking about it. I can't even lie.
And we're talking about
Um,
a husband and wife, spouses, correct?
right. But let me back up a step
Sure.
and say that the story is about the alarmingly alarming rate at which cancer is increasing among young people, particularly in the United States. I have to start by saying that that's where the story starts. And then we have an all-star team, or we had at the Washington Post, data analyst Dan Keating and writer Ariana Cha, who, I mean, and these people started digging into who might best illustrate uh, uh, this big topic. Uh, because a lot of times the best ways to illustrate some big topic like the rising rates of cancer among young people is to find very specific characters, just one set of characters. So it's through the search that we found this family, this young man who at 25 years old, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer a couple of years after getting married to, it was a young marriage, his wife, who's just a year younger. At the time we met Tanner Martin and his family, uh, he was 30 years old. His wife was a few months pregnant, and we knew that Tanner was on his way out the door, basically, and Tanner knew it. What they had done was made the choice to have a child while Tanner was living and hope that Tanner would be alive long enough to see the birth of this child and hopefully interact with this child. So we followed this family for the course of a few months, for the last 6 months of Tanner's life, as he raced to stay alive to see the birth of his daughter, Amy Lou, who he did stay alive long enough to see. And then spend a little bit of time with her 41 days before he passed away. And so that is in a nutshell what the story was.
Are you you were talking about the origin of the idea for this story, and
Hmm.
I'm curious about the process at the Post. Are you involved from the get go um, in the newsroom, or do they bring in the photojournalist after they've conceived the idea and then pitch it to you?
It happens in different ways where sometimes I'm brought in the very beginning, sometimes I'm brought in the very last, when there's an investigative story that needs to be kept completely hush. But on this one, a lot of work had already been done to find characters for the stories because there were multiple characters, not just this family. This family just ended up being the bulk of the work and the bulk of what my photo story ended up being. But I was brought in after they had been found and interacted with. And I believe I was brought in by photo editor Maya Valentine because of the sensitivities that she thought I might bring to the story. That based on our work we had done before in the last couple of years, we worked together on a story about the maternal health crisis of Black women in the U.S. So she understood that I would bring certain sensitivities to the story. We talked about from the beginning that the story would be in black and white, just stark black and white, just to strip away any distractions of color. So all that would be left would be the content. And in the first meeting that I was brought in to, uh, and they had been having meetings for months. But in the first one they brought me into, they asked me what my approach would be. And my first answer was how I do anyway. I told them that while a lot of talk has been about him dying, my focus will be to capture him and his family and all the support system around him living, living as much as possible. And what'll be shown in the course of that is him dying. That's the most obvious thing. But I wanted to work to capture those glimmers of light, the spark of him before he left.
And that is actually a good segue into the next question I want to ask you. But I'll pause for a moment to say that we will post a link to Jahi's collection of photos that are on the Pulitzer site. We'll post a link in the episode description on wuky.org. So I want to get into the artistry of being a photojournalist because you were getting into that in your answer a little bit. I want to dispel the myth that photojournalism happens so quickly that there's no time to make artistic decisions. Can you pull back the curtain for us a little bit and let us in on your thought process? How do you prepare? What do you think about ahead of time, and what do you think about in the moment when you're making those artistic decisions?
We had a chance to talk about some of this stuff a little bit, or you gave me a little bit of a heads up, right, to give thought to this myth that photojournalism happens so quickly that there aren't any artistic decisions. And I thought it was, I mean, it's a good question. And I mean, I know how photojournalists are portrayed in movies and in media and stuff, but I thought it was kind of silly. I kind of chuckled because I cannot think of any successful photojournalist who's ever just made a career, even a short career, let alone a long one, by willy-nilly just flinging their cameras about uh, and haphazardly coming up with work that moves us. I'm not even talking about wins awards, but creates work that moves us even in the fastest moving news, you know. And I thought of the Pulitzer Prize that happened some years ago, some breaking news Pulitzer Prize story where there's this woman who her and her child are falling from a balcony of a burning building. And the way it's composed so artistically, see, as graphic as it is, that these people are falling probably to their demise. There's even in that fastest of photojournalism, there's so much art and I know thought into what went into taking that picture. Because it didn't just happen by somebody whipping that camera. That camera had to be fully prepared to take that picture. And probably had already been thinking about the frames and how they would look when those people were falling if that balcony of the burning building fell. Um, for me, I'm best when you give me a story. It's like this, I'm not even gonna say onion and be cliche, but it's just so multi-dimensional that you have to go at it with codes. You can't just peel back an onion. You got to work through codes and mazes to get to the of the stories that I'm typically working on. So in those stories, I'm usually given a whole bunch of time to think about the artistry of my work. And I'll say that along with I can't think of a photojournalist who's ever been successful long term who didn't have some sense of artistry about their work. Photography in itself is an art. If you break down the word photography, photo meaning light, graphy meaning draw, is to draw with light. And in order for me to make the biggest impact on you or anybody else, or even myself as a viewer of my photos, is to create this piece of art that makes you want to stare at it, even if you don't know why, like good art does. I just came back from Amsterdam a few days ago, where I visited, some of their Dutch master museums, and I understood why they are called masters of the arts, even though a lot of that art, most of it I saw in the museum, were depictions of their conquer of different parts of the world, but the artistry and the way they depicted light through paints was incredible. You understood it. And I bring that, I'm not even gonna say Dutch mastery. I bring that Jahi Chikwendiu artistic mastery for all the hours I've spent into all of my work, all of it. Every single frame that you ever see of mine, I hope is so carefully thought about in its artistic rendering. And I say that one of the things you mentioned, one of the stories you mentioned about me covering was the world's formation of the newest country, South Sudan. When I was sent to cover that story in South Sudan, my boss, Michael Ducille, he said that, hey, when you hit the ground running, land in the airport, and don't even check in before you check into a hotel, anything. Just ride around, just jumping out of your car, even get it from the windows of your car, just the snapshots of what the landscape looks like and the humanscape looks like. And I did, and I sent those pictures. And he said, cool, cool. I got him. Looks good, looks good. Now I need to see Jahi. Now let us see Jahi. And I knew exactly what that meant.
Yeah.
They hired me because I was free. They gave me the freedom to tell stories the way I saw them.
And they kind of played into your process because they identified they know how you work. It sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. They're like, man, if this is what you do, just do it. And there's this question about, experimentation and how I see. And I do not shy away from finding depth in reflections. And people sometimes like, wow, man, you got reflections in your work and blah, blah, blah. I do not run away from using a reflection to add another layer of context to the limited space I have as a photo frame.
And that's one of those artistic choices, right?
Completely. I mean, it's all artistic. I'm looking at a picture right now of mine that just looks at, I was telling a story in Kenya of, the conflict in Somalia. Since it was so dangerous in Somalia, I couldn't go there. So I was telling a story about this Kenyan Somali community in Kenya. And the story is this two schoolgirls interacting with one another. First of all, when I saw it, when I look at it, I'm like, wow, that light is beautiful after coming from Amsterdam. But I also noticed the reflection of the window, too, of the school that reflects in the reflection, that has in the reflection the city, and the makeup of the city uh, outside that window. So all these things are just the artistic expressions that use light uh, to draw.
I have to ask because I've met another photographer who I I swear I think he looks through his eyes and his vision is gridded off in the rule of thirds. Do you ever find yourself just out and about thinking that way?
Bro, like Bryce Harper, the baseball player, young baseball player, said, he said, man, that's a clown question. So I play I play Tetris a lot of times, right? And when
Yeah,
I really like in this mode of playing Tetris, I walk around and pieces are falling out of the sky everywhere in my head. You know what I mean? I could
yeah,
be, if we were in person, I would have Tetris pieces falling on your shoulders. And the same, all around you to build up the wall. So I walk around taking pictures, man.
yeah.
If we were in conversation and the light was bad for you, I would probably, without you noticing it sometimes, I would probably slowly turn, and turn you so that I would be looking at you in your best light.
Huh.
And then frame you up in a frame like where a tree's not coming out of your head. Or I walk around just in constant picture taking mode, as we all are. I just give it more deliberate thought.
Yeah. I've heard that there are music composers since gone, but it's written of them that there are things that will show up in their music that frequently, and it's like they just can't help it. They return to this motive or this rhythm. So I think it's an artist thing. I totally think it's an artist thing, and a good artist thing.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I said at the top of your introduction that you are a Lexington native. So I want to
mhm.
ask you about growing up here in Kentucky and how much that influenced you to choose photojournalism. Was there anything here that inspired you?
You know what? You know what? I thought about that. I thought about that. And I thought, I don't know if it'd be specific to Kentucky that my father was, an amateur photographer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that his his last camera, that he ever had would be my first. And I don't know that that's Kentucky specific, but I bring that up, right? He was a Kentucky dude, a
Hmm.
Kentucky artist. But bigger than that, what I think growing up in Kentucky brought, and I think people underestimate about Kentucky and maybe places around, the country, but me specifically, Kentucky, is the sense of art in Kentucky that I know of. I met so many what I would call really good to great artists just going through while I was taking my math classes at UK. That one photo class that I would take where I would be hanging out with the art people. I mean, incredible communities of art. And when I go back to Lexington, I love that I see so much art and that art is, part of the lifeblood of Lexington. And I've spent time in Eastern Kentucky doing work at the Lexington Herald Leader as well as at the Washington Post. We work on bigger national stories that bring me back to Kentucky. And one of the stories I worked on in Eastern Kentucky back in the Lexington Herald days was this community of kind of Celtic bluegrass folk singers in Kentucky. And what is it? Apple Shop in Eastern Kentucky. I think and art in general just runs through the veins of Kentucky that had no choice but to influence me in ways that I probably take for granted when I travel to other places. I don't even know the level of art that's in me, but I know that Lexington and Kentucky in general, but Lexington specifically influenced me in that way.
And I know, as a matter of fact, how I met you was when you won the 2017 Governor's Awards in the Arts, given by the Kentucky Arts Council each year. I want to ask. So you, as you mentioned, you shot for the Herald Leader. What was it? Was how big a deal was it for you to be able to do that for your hometown paper?
When I look back, I cannot think of a better upbringing for me as a photojournalist. That is the absolute truth. Before I had been taking pictures for about 10 years before I showed anybody my pictures outside some of my closest friends and outside of the people of the few photo classes I had at UK. I had showed very few people, but some of the first people I showed were at the Washington Post. I felt like I had been working on this craft for so long and studying people working at the highest levels that I felt like, you know what, I can run with them. So I ran up to the Washington Post, being like one of the first people to look at my work, and they noticed the artistry, like we talked about, and they noticed the the vision for storytelling that's bigger than the art. You know, you have to string together these pieces of art into stories. Um, but he told one of the advices he gave me was to, without any clips, because I visited the Washington Post as a math teacher. He said, go back and freelance. You know, teachers get the summer off. Go back and freelance at your local paper and just build up some clips. Uh, when I when I took that advice and I went back and I kind of met some Lexington Herald people, photographers. I did not know that it would lead to them giving me a job at the end of that summer, for one. But what I met by going back and not getting the job straight away at the Washington Post, but by coming back to Kentucky and working along some of these undersung photographers who, to this day, I will say, are some of the best photojournalists, the world's best photojournalists. These dudes like David Stevenson, Charles Bertram, Mark Cornelison. I could be leaving some names out, but those are the first ones. Those dudes were masters of photography and photojournalism. And it was the perfect little, and Ron Garrison, who hired me, who was the photo director there. And Ron recognizing early too that art and that just, okay, let him go play. You know, just let Jahi go play and he's gonna come back with something. He recognized that and gave me that freedom to go play and earn my master's in photojournalism by having a job there. And I say that because when I first went to Ron Garrison to show him my portfolio, it was simply to show him my portfolio to ask his advice. You know, I'm thinking about going to school, back to school, to Western Kentucky University or Ohio University or somewhere to get a photo background, a photo degree. It was him who said, you know what? You know what? I see your work. I see your level of artistry. I see your level of drive and the way you slide your way into people's lives. How about you come here and give me a job? How about you come here and work with us? And just the most valuable 2 years of my photo career.
Wow, what an invitation! That's and it sounds like it's a mix of mentors and colleagues that you still hold in high esteem there.
Still in contact with them. Still in contact with all these people. I mean, not, you know, not as close, but yeah, the last time I was in Lexington, Mark Cornelison, I'll give him a plug,
Yeah.
Cornelison 10. He snapped finally. We've been talking about get my 10 type done. Snap my 10 type. Talked to Stevenson not too long ago. You know, we talk and text.
Well, I want to turn now to it's on my mind. It's a curiosity. What do you shoot when you aren't on the clock? What do you like to shoot when you're not on the clock, when you're not being paid for it, when you're not being sent out on on an assignment or breaking news?
So, so for the longest time of my photo career, I have always said that I wish cameras could be invisible, right? Or I wish
Yeah.
I could just take pictures with the smallest camera ever. Because I'm not one of those who cares to flash and flash my big lenses and all that stuff. Because the work I do, I want to be as invisible as a photographer as possible. So I've always wished for the smallest, stuff ever. So if this was a video interview we were doing right now, I would be holding up my phone camera.
So that's your
Is
camera of
that
choice for like
yeah,
personal shooting.
yeah, 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 yeah. And sometimes it doesn't have. I wish I had a really small camera like this, and I'm sure there are apps that I could put on this phone to give me more ISO control. You know, those three manual controls that I use on any other camera:
Yeah.
aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. But if it's had those buttons and the little knobs, like I'm sure you could put like some little roll knobs on a iPhone. I would use it. That's the camera I would be holding up. I've never been one of those, never been one of those ride around with my camera in shotgun with it ready to run,
Hmm.
ready to swing up my camera. Because first of all, it's dangerous trying to take pictures and drive and stuff,
Yeah.
right? I mean, all my stuff is thoughtful. I don't want to be driving and, oh, wow, this is a scene, da, 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 blah, accidentally, came across some. If it happens like that and I get a picture that just tells some big story that the world needs to see, cool. But I've just never been, I'm more like find somewhere easy to park, easy to get out of, get out, walk around and be very deliberate about how you roll and be as invisible as possible. And a phone does that nicely.
So when you do that stuff that's off the clock, that's just for Jahi,
Yeah.
do you have a favorite subject or a favorite place to shoot photos?
I mean, everything and anything goes. I mean, life in general expands for me. I might run into an interesting mount of ants, that that now these cameras, phone cameras, you can get down really low and put your lens close to the ground and try to tell stories from, the point of view of ants. I I, I regularly go to, for morning walks in the woods, right by my house where should I see more deer and foxes and turtles and geese and all that than humans. And I was just thinking on a walk this morning that I have this video of this turtle, right? That I ran into this turtle on the trail one day on my bike ride. And I got down and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a selfie of me and this turtle and I'm gonna show the turtle the selfie and just to get a reaction. And I got down on turtle level. I was on my chest in the mud and stuff. It was rainy, and took this selfie and showed it to the turtle. And the turtle was sitting there. I promise I wish I could visualize this, looking at me, looking at the picture, looking back at me, like his head going back and forth, and just turned and walked off like, and I could only imagine what this turtle was telling the little turtle community, like, about what just happened. Like this dude took a picture, in turtle language, took some image of me where I could see me. And you know what I did too? I'll say this lastly, is I took a picture of the back of the turtle, the part of the turtle that you pretty sure it could never see the back of its shell. And I showed the turtle the back of its shell.
Yeah,
That's the type of
because it would never see that. That's
no, 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 no,
yeah.
no. It's like, no, tell it, and then go back. So the conversation back in Turtledom, Turtleville would be because nobody in Turtleville, everybody knows nobody can describe their own back, right? But
Right.
everybody can see the turtle's back, and this turtle's now magical. It can go around describing its own back. You know what I mean?
Right. I gotta say, that sounds like there's a children's book in that.
Hey, that's why did you say that? Because I've been thinking about some children's books. I have some children's books. That's no lie. I have some children's books ideas, man. I'm gonna throw that one on the little list.
Well, briefly, because we're coming up on being out of time here. I want to ask, what's you mentioned you're retired from the Washington Post. What's next for you?
Uh, I mean, to be keep on becoming better at pickleball and uh uh you know, in all seriously though, I just finished a cinematography class. I got into photo. I I got into, and this is completely dreaming. I'm gonna take these 2 minutes or whatever, a minute to answer this question. as fully as I can. But I got into photography out of a desire to be a filmmaker. It's that the University of Kentucky at the time didn't have a filmmaking structure program. So I started taking still photographs, and I just, for the last 30 years, been a still photographer. So I just finished the cinematography class. I want to really turn my way back to putting focus on, I call them motion pictures, motion photography, and telling stories through not just documentary films, but films that I've written myself. I've written on some scripts and stuff like that. But on a bigger pie issue, I want to really start some, even if small, some sort of educational academy, moving back to Kentucky at some point soon, and going back to my roots and start some sort of educational academy, even if it's 10 students that focuses on, mind, body, and soul.
Well, it sounds like a natural evolution from what you've been doing your whole career. I want to thank Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist Jahi Chikwendiu for joining us today. We'll put a link to his photo essay on the Open Studio page on wuky.org, as well as a link to his own website. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks for having me. Honored.
Listen to Open Studio every Friday during WUKY's Morning Edition and in the afternoon during All Things Considered. Or listen to extended segments at the Open Studio podcast, available at wuky.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Do you have an idea for an Open Studio segment? We're always on the lookout for news and events in Central Kentucky's arts and cultural community. Email us at openstudiowuky@gmail.com or visit our Facebook page, keywords Open Studio on WUKY. Your idea may make it on the air. I'm Tom Musgrave. Thanks for listening to Open Studio on WUKY.